Imagine Earth is a game that caught my attention when I saw it during my upcoming games video a week or so ago, and it's a strategy city builder based in space where you are building colonies for a global corporation. Does it build up a decent head of steam as you are playing, or is it about as much fun as being in a residential zone that's been built next to the industrial one? Rookie mistake. Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. So looking at the story then, well, you are a member, the newest member in fact, of Imagine Earth Limited, a global corporation specialising in setting up colonies on habitable planets found across the galaxy. You are tasked with building such colonies, trying to keep the balance of profit versus happiness of your population, whilst at the same time having to deal with competitors trying to set up their colonies before you. It's a game with an environmental message in terms of how we treat our world, although I did feel that it was dealt with in a realistic way in terms of what we do need to do and take from our world, whilst highlighting some of the dangers of taking too much. So gameplay wise, this is of course a city building strategy game, seeing you build a number of colonies over a variety of planets. The story I mentioned a minute ago relates to the campaign mode, but there are a few other game modes that I'll touch on briefly. These include a competition mode in which you compete against other companies to earn the settlement license for an uninhabited planet. There is an endless mode where you can grow your civilization according to your own ideas, and there's also a weekly challenge mode. Finally, there is an editor mode that allows you to terraform the planet to your liking before starting a run. The vast majority of my time though was spent in the campaign mode, and here you will be given license to a number of different planets with a set objective, usually starting with a number of people that you need to populate the colonies with, but other objectives will come into play as you go through each of the campaign planets. In terms of how it works, it has strands of games such as SimCity to it, with you having to set up residential areas in order to build that population I mentioned a minute ago, but of course the population will then need certain things. Starting with the basics, of course they'll need food, power, and there needs to be a commercial side to things with goods being available to them, and these manifest in a number of different buildings that you can lay down. You'll need to think about your placement, as people won't like living next to the industrial side of things, and this will lower their general happiness and could potentially cause you problems later on. The world of course is built on a sphere, with you having an area that you own, although you can claim more land by spending your money to do so, and once you meet a certain number of objectives you'll be given another landing permit, allowing you basically to create another city centre somewhere on the planet to further increase the amount of land you own on that planet's surface. You'll be able to research into particular areas, which enables you to upgrade the buildings you have. For example, it could be that you can then introduce public transport into your cities, or enable your factories to use robots to speed up production. As well as this, you have tech licenses that you can earn when your colonies become profitable enough, and this basically allows you to unlock new buildings that you can then use. It's quite interesting, this is how the game deals with the idea of having to go through technological ages that you would expect to be defunct or anachronistic by this point. For example, you may have to start off using coal, because whilst the other technologies are available in this game world, your colony isn't profitable enough to be seen as worthy of using these future technologies until you make that so. It's quite an interesting way of explaining going through the motions of upgrading what you use. Every decision you make will have an impact on the planet, not just in terms of the buildings you lay, but in terms of its global footprint by way of pollution, say for example. It is within your power to improve this footprint by way of cleaning your buildings or being more energy efficient, and this again comes through the menus where you can upgrade each building as you put more research into things. Once you build a spaceport, you will have visitors come to your planet who you can buy and sell goods with, and rival companies will also land on the planet to start their own colonies. This is a quite interesting aspect to the game because you can stay neutral to them, or you can form an alliance or declare a rivalry, and you can even go so far as to buy shares in their company if they do have financial difficulties, or sell shares of your own if you become to the same fate. There are also times where you can make a decision as to how to act with these rivals. For example, an epidemic broke out within the rival's base, and I could develop medicine to help them and give it to them as a donation, or I could sell it to them at a higher price, basically taking advantage of their needs at the time. In this instance, I decided to donate, and then when an epidemic broke out across my colony later in the game, they followed suit and donated back, owing to that strong relationship I built by doing a good deed by them when they needed it. The game does throw a lot at you, You have your advisors as you used to have in games such as SimCity, and they will come back to you whenever there is a new feature being introduced. And it's done in an organic way and never felt overwhelming. Yes, there is a lot to learn, there are a lot of menus to navigate, but it does feel quite natural, and I do applaud the game for its use of its menus, and we'll come on to that in a minute when we look at controls. Completion of all objectives on one planet will see you move on to another and obviously be given a new set of objectives, and the campaign itself is relatively lengthy, with that endless mode also available to you, don't forget, if you do complete the campaign. Let's look at controls now then, and in terms of how you do most of your navigating, if you hold down the A button on a blank part of the map, it will bring up a wheel of everything that's available to you in terms of buildings you can lay or items that you can use, but you can also press left on the D-pad to bring up a menu that's similar by the side of the screen. Whilst it can be slightly awkward at times to highlight the exact thing you want, I found this especially difficult in the research menus. For the most part, I must say that the translation of what is ultimately a game made for PC onto the console has come across very well. Pressing down right on the D-pad will also bring up a view of all of the buildings that you've laid so far, and from here you can upgrade all of the buildings by going down this list, which is much easier of course than navigating across all of your cities to find the ones you need to do this for. This could have been tidied up a little bit. It could have reminded you of exactly what the upgrade was for each of those particular buildings by just hovering over it, but for the most part it was a nice, clean and accessible control scheme. Gameplay is incredibly enjoyable, I must say. There aren't an abundance of strategy games on the Switch, certainly not city builders like this, and this is most definitely the best one I've played. I've only scratched the surface really of what you can do. There is a huge amount to cover, but I found it very compelling and couldn't stop playing. It gets 18 out of 20. Controls translate across to the console very well. It's not perfect, but then I don't think this genre ever will be on a console system, but it's not bad at all, and it gets 17 out of 20. Moving on to the visuals then, and in terms of the character models, there is a cartoony feel to the game in that respect, although the planet itself does look very impressive with its spherical view, and I did like the way that the buildings were presented on screen. There wasn't a huge amount of variety between them, and it was perhaps difficult at times to pick out in a crowded area what was what, but you can zoom in and out using the ZL and ZR buttons, and those menus I mentioned earlier do help with this too. The cast of characters are relatively interesting, although never given a huge amount of personality, which to me didn't really matter, I must say. It wasn't something I felt was desperately needed in the game for my enjoyment to peak, but it's something just to bear in mind if you feel you need this in your characters. Looking at performance, whilst it does run pretty well, I didn't experience any slowdown as the planets became more populated. What I did experience, unfortunately, were a couple of crashes. There is an autosave feature within the game, and I didn't lose more than I would say 5 minutes of progress both times, but it's still disappointing nonetheless, and just something to be aware of. A patch to solve that would be much appreciated. Onto the audio, and the characters I mentioned a moment ago are voice acted, and this is done to a decent standard, again giving them a hint of a personality which is never fully realised, but the main strength of the audio is the background music, which is lovely and serene, very relaxing actually, and just fits the gameplay incredibly well, even if things are becoming quite manic in terms of your management of your cities, or any issues that you may have with natural disasters say, or rival takeovers. It's nice to have that music in the background stay quite consistent whilst you work your way through these problems. Visuals are certainly charming, the planets look lovely, and I liked the way the buildings were represented, but those crashes of course will impact the score. On the whole it gets 14 out of 20. Audio, as I mentioned, is lovely and calm, really does fit exactly the vibe I want when I'm playing such a game, and the voice acting does a good enough job too. It gets 18 out of 20. Imagine Earth costs £22.49 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you have that campaign mode of course, which I felt was of a good size. Each planet will take you a good couple of hours to make your way through, and depending on your stamina for such games, it could almost serve as a massive tutorial for you to then take into the endless modes or the challenges. There's definitely a lot to do here though, and the production values for the most part were high, the only problem being of course those crashes. It is a genre that I feel is underpopulated, if you pardon the pun, on the Switch, and I for one was very happy to find a game of this type that was very fun to play. I'm a big fan of such games, and I felt this one eased you in nicely. The tutorial did its job fantastically well, and even when I turned the system off, I was thinking about my next steps when I got around to playing it again. On the whole, I would say value gets 15 out of 20. To conclude, Imagine Earth was exactly what I wanted it to be, a comprehensive and in-depth city building game with a number of different objectives, scenarios and problems for you to solve, the thought-provoking aspects of progress versus nature and how you keep that balance, a decent AI and a good control scheme when brought across to consoles. It is a genre that's not represented as well on the Switch as some others, meaning that any game that gets those basics right will stand a chance, and Imagine Earth does just that. Those crashes were unfortunate, and had it not been for the auto-save feature, could have brought the score down further. There is a manual save as well, I must say, but the auto-save feature definitely came to the rescue both of those times. But if you have any love for city builders or strategy games in general, then this is one I would definitely recommend if you just bear in mind a couple of rough edges. Imagine Earth gets a SwitchUp score of 82%. Thank you everybody for watching this review, I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can get your eShop cards via our website, switchup.gg. Doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back in cashback that you can use against a future purchase, and there are other links down there to places such as PlayAsia, Red Art Games. If you want to pick up some physical games, and again there are links down there and codes for discounts. You can also pick up joycons down there at a discount if you use the links. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.